Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking you through an Excel problem about Battleship. It was the qualifying round for the FMWC Open, and I think it was a super problem actually. It was really enjoyable. It was a very simple idea. Started off as a very approachable first level and then worked its way up to something really tricky. So the problem is available on their website, fmworldcup.com. So I'll walk you through it very quickly and then I'll kind of dive in. So the idea is it's based on the game of Battleship. So there's a 10 by 10 grid. Let's go down to one of the busier ones. The 10 by 10 grid, and each player places various different ships. You got battleships and destroyers and so on, ones of length 4, 3, 2, and 1 around the grid. And then, so two players each place a grid like that. And then the players take turns calling squares on the other player's board, which is taking a shot. So, you call C4, you shoot this, I can click on them, you shoot the square over here, you miss, so then turn goes back to the other player. If you get a hit, then you get to keep taking shots until you get a miss, and once you've hit a ship in all of the different squares it occupies, you sink the battleship, and the first player to sink all of the other players' ships wins the game. And so the idea in this problem is you're given these various boards that get harder as you go on. So first level there's just one ship on the board. Second level there's four ships, but they're all just single squares. Third level there's ships all over the place, and then the fourth level has another twist that we'll come to in a minute. And then for each level you get the sequence of moves that each player is going to play. So it looks something like this. Player one's going to play A7 first, then J1, then B10, then C9, then G4. It goes all the way down, all the way through the 100 squares in the order that that player is going to hit them. And so your aim is to say, given the locations of the ships in both grids, and given the two players' sequences of moves, which turn is the game going to end on? And there's an example in the file that you can kind of look through to get more detail. The twist for the fourth level is that rather than just saying, rather than just going through the 100 squares in the order you're given, you get a little bit smarter and you say, well, if I've sunk a ship, I guess it's supposed to be a rule. I don't remember that rule, but so none of the ships are adjacent to each other. So once I've sunk, let's say this ship here, then any time that I was otherwise planning to shoot into a square around it, I'm going to skip that square and go on to the next turn. So that obviously complicates things a little bit. So I'll talk a little bit about some initial thoughts and preamble, and then I'll kind of take you through what I think is a sort of neat solution that I've come up with after puzzling over it for a while. So let's start with the first one. It's relatively straightforward. You've got one ship for each one, so obviously you're going to win as soon as you call the square that your opponent's only ship is on. So let's say these are player one's ships, so as soon as player two calls D9, whatever turn they do that on, the game is going to end, and as soon as player one calls G3, whatever turn they do that on, the game is going to end. And so whichever one of them calls that first, that's the winner. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. I think probably a lot of people's first instinct when they see data like this is going to be to say, let's use text to columns, and we can split it out. So you go Alt-AE, delimited, next, semicolon, I've already selected it, finish, that splits it out. And then actually probably we should really, if we're going to do that, carry over all this data about the rounds and the boards and put that there as well. Now you'll see if any of you saw the FMWC Battle of 16, you'll know that fun with merged cells is one of the ways that they like to make these games challenging. So you'll see here there's two different rows in each game with the player's moves, but there's only one that has the game and the level and so on. So, in this case, you might just say go special blank cells equals the row above, and then it'll fill down. Or there's other ways that you can deal with that as well. And then here, I'm actually going to want to do one more text columns, which is split on colon to break that off, and I'll say space as well. Finish. So now I've got, game one, player one does this sequence of moves, and then once you have it like that, it's quite easy to say, to use a match to find out where the thing that they're shooting for takes place. So let's say player one is shooting at the player two board, so they're trying to hit G3. So you can just say, well, let's just be vaguely good about it, make it an assumption cell. Did I say G3? G3, yes. So then you can say match G3 against this, and I'll just lock it in the row because I want to copy it down. 0. So on turn 33, they get their hit, and then player 2 is shooting at the player 1 board. They want to hit D9. So player 1 hits the opponent's ship on turn 33. Player 2 hits the opponent's ship on turn 10. So obviously the answer to that case is just going to be the smaller of the two. You come over there, get that, and then you can copy that down for the first, whoops, wrong way, copy it down this way. So I'm going to want 50 rows to get the first 25 games. And then I can copy this down. And that gives you an answer for all of those. So that works nicely for the first one. And then obviously the further along you go, the more tricky it gets. So at the next level, you don't just have one square to aim for, you have 4. So let's go like this. Those aren't the right values. So player 1 is shooting for B3, E7, E3, E7, H6, and J10. H6, J10. And player 2 is shooting for B2, F7. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking it's quite error prone to be typing these all in like that, that's definitely true. I'm just, like I said, one of the things I really like about this problem is that it's very approachable at the start. So you can start off with, you know, some kind of semi-manual things. It's going to be harder to do that when you get down to, you know, a couple of different sets of boards that each have 20 squares occupied. But for now, let's keep it simple. So next one is G4 and then I1. So G4 and I1. And then you can use the same formula to say match this against the string of 100, lock in the row, exact match. And then you can see the turns on which each of those ships get hit. And obviously you win the game when you've sunk all the ships, which means on the last turn. And then the important thing to remember is that if you hit a ship, then you get another shot on that turn. So even though you've made 25, you've shot 25 times, but 3 times you got an extra turn, so it's going to be that minus 3 is the game turn on which it ends. And again, you're just going to want to take the minimum of those 2, so we'll zip over here. Boom. Say min of those 2. And again, you could copy that down all the way, and that gives you section 2. So again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing that way. That's one approach. I'll just quickly mention one other approach that I think is also kind of neat, but comes with a couple of caveats, which is you don't have to split it up at all. You could just say, so let's see, player 1 in this case is shooting at, oh, I've got it over here, so I'll come get it, G3 and D9. So if I paste those there, then you can also say, not match, but find that text in here. And the answer is it's in the 112th position. So in other words, if I take left of that, this gives me, I'll just value paste it here for a second, this gives me the string of moves up to the start of the last move. So how can I turn that into the number of moves? Well, it's very simple. The delimiter is a semicolon. So I want to know how many semicolons, and that's the number of turns that I've used plus the one I'm on, so plus 1. Now, there's a kind of fairly standard Excel trick that you might have come across. If you want to know how many of some character occurs in a string, you can take the length of the string, so that's the total number of characters, and then the length of the string that you get if you replace that character with nothing. So here I've got substitute AK56, replace all the semicolons with nothing, and I'm going to see how much shorter it gets when I do that, and the answer is it gets 32 shorter. And then again, so that means I've used up 32 turns. I'm on my 33rd turn, so I have to add back 1. You got to be a little careful with the off by 1 errors that you could hit here. And then copy that down. And again, you've got 33 and 10, which, yeah, matches up with over there, and you can copy that down. So that's even a little bit neater because you don't have to spread out to 100 columns. But having said that, there are some challenges if you go with this approach. So let's say that instead of D9, you were shooting for D10. Sorry, I should say shooting for D1. Then you have to be careful because you'll get a hit on, probably should have checked in advance where that's going to be in here, but never mind. You'll get a hit on, let's say, if this was D1, you'll get a hit on that, but if this was D10, you'd also get a hit on the D1 at the start of D10. So you need to be a little bit careful if you do it this way. Very quickly, a couple of ways that you can get around that. One is you can, instead of just searching for G3, you can search for a G3 followed by a semicolon, and then you might just need to add a semicolon to the end of this to make sure there is one. If you're looking very carefully, you'll see that for some reason the player 1 move strings don't have a semicolon at the end, but the player 2 move strings do. I guess that's a quirk of how they put the data together. But anyway, if you do the search that way, add a semicolon to what you're looking for and add a semicolon to here, then that gets you around the problem of hitting a C10 if you want to hit a C1 or something like that. Or the other thing, well, I won't talk about the other thing now. I'm going to keep that as a surprise for when I do my other nifty way. So that's a couple of ways that you can approach the earlier levels. And let me just talk quickly about the additional challenges that you hit on the later levels, and then I'll kind of walk you through what I think of as my kind of neat solution for this. So obviously the challenge going from level 2 to level 3 is you've gone from having 4 boats to having 20 boats. That's 2 challenges. One is, it's just if you type it in by hand, you're going to have to type in 20 boats. It'll take you a lot longer and there's a much bigger chance of making an error. The second thing is, each of these boats is actually, a little character. There's kind of something you could work with there data-wise. But these bigger ones are actually just pictures pasted on top of what are empty cells. So that also, if you thought about ways that you might automate this, the fact that those cells don't have anything in them makes it a little bit more complicated. So that's the twist there. And then the twist, obviously, for level 4 is that you have to figure out how to get around the empty spaces. So I'll just quickly flip over to the file that I made when I tried this the first time round. Like I said, what I'm going to show you in a minute is with the benefit of having thought about it for a few days afterwards and come up with something a little neater. But first time I did this, the way I thought about this section 4 where you have to go around it is with this grid. So you'll see it basically matches the layout of this one. The gray squares are the squares with boats in them, and then all the other squares are the squares without. And in each cell, so let's say B2, I checked for the round that was active. I have a selector for the round. When does that get hit? So on the 41st turn, B2 gets hit. On the 24th turn, B3 gets hit, and so on. And so if you look at the max of those, the highest number there is 47. And so on turn 47, this boat gets sunk. And so in all the cells around that, I just put the max of that range here, of that gray ship. And I just copy that, put it all around. Then the yellow cells are the ones that border 2 different ships, so they get put out of play as soon as either ship gets sunk, so it's the smaller of the 2 maxes. And then over here on the second board, there's also one that's kind of adjacent to 3 different ships, so you've got a min of 3 different things. And then these red ones are the ones that are not bordering any ships, so they never get out. And so this is basically telling you, if you try to hit this cell A1 after turn 47, it's already out of play, and so you can skip that one and go on and still have your turn. So that's how I did it, but as you can see, this is like super, it's not the worst way you could do it, but it's not the best way either. So you've got the same formula in all the boat cells, but then you've got lots of different formulas around. So this one's specifically about that range, this one's specifically about that range, all the yellow ones. And there's always the chance that you miss one, like that you just make this one reference that range instead of also referencing that range or something else silly. So anyway, okay, that's enough kind of preamble. I'm going to show you my my kind of more general solution now. And I'll show you how I came up with a slightly more automated version of this. So having said that, let me just clear out all the messing around with the data I've been doing here. Working in a very small portion of my screen as I do this so that it'll be legible when it turns into a video. So you're welcome. All right, so let's clear out all of this. Let's just delete that sheet. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to try and give you a slightly more general solution. So a couple of tricks that make this a little bit easier. Number one, I mentioned earlier that the fact that H1 and H10 or C1 and C10 have an overlap makes it a little more complicated. It also means that not all of these are the same length, and the way I'm going to show you, it'll actually be helpful to have them the same length. So the first thing that I did was basically replace all the 10s with just a 0. You could also replace it with some letter or something. Oops, I'm already getting ahead of myself there. Clear, fine format. So I'm just going to replace 10 with 0. And then I'm going to, I'll be a little bit good and not do a strict find and replace. I'll do a substitute here. So I'm going to take mid of that. I think cell 10 yeah, that gets you. So if you basically skip the first 9 characters, that drops the player part. And we'll go 999. And then we'll substitute that 10 with 0. And that just makes that whole thing a little bit easier to work with. And one quick sense check is we can just say, how long is that now? And the answer is 299, 300. And like I said, the difference there is just that these ones have a semicolon at the end, these ones don't. So what you've got is 100 things that are each now exactly 2 characters long, because we got rid of the ones that are 3 characters long. That's 200 characters plus either 99 or 100 dividers. So that, you could copy that all the way down just to make sure that sense check continues to check out. And the answer is it does. They're all 299 or 300. So now you feel pretty good about the data being regular. So having said that, let's get a clean page. We'll put a game selector here. Let's start with game 1. And then I'll do a lookup for the level. Just to make Dan Mayo mad, I'm going to use a VLOOKUP. Into 0. You could take advantage of the fact that all the levels are the same size. They're all 25 levels, so you could also just make this equals ceiling of that over 25 to 0 digits. Oops, no, to 1 digit. I'm used to using roundup, not ceiling. That's why that didn't work as I was expecting. Anyway, that's all inside. So then if you get to 25, 25 over 25 is 1, 26 over 25 is like 1.04, so it rounds up to 2. Or, the lookup is a little more generalizable if the levels were different sizes. So then I'm going to want the P1 board. Now I'm going to make a lot of people mad just for fun by using offset. So I'll come up here. So I'm going to offset from here. And what I'm going to offset by, I'm going to match level and $C, $3, and star against this. F4, F0, and then I'm going to subtract 1 because 0 offset for the one where it matches in the first row. Too few arguments, sorry, yeah, so that's the number of rows, and then offset 0 columns. So that gives me the board. That's helpful. I'm just going to quickly format that so that zeros are 0 are blank. Okay, so that's that. Let's just make it narrow, and then I'll do the P2 board. And that's going to be basically the same thing, except instead of C to M, it's going to be from Q to Z. I say Z like an American now because I've been here for a while. No, hang on, not Q, sorry, P to Z. Okay, and then I'll just copy the format and column width. Okay, so that's the 2 players boards. Now, again, I mentioned earlier that the ships are going to complicate this thing. So let's go to level 76. We've got 4 ships that we can see, but we've got a whole bunch of ships that we can't see. So on the day, I actually went in and typed in 1s into each of these cells. But I have a slightly neater method to use here since I'm doing the, having thought about it for a while version. And that is, we're going to do a find and replace. Find anything and replace it with a 1, and what we're going to look for is anything where the fill is this color, which is the color of the background of the ships. Going to hit replace all, made 90 replacements, and then you can see, look, all of these now have 1s filled in behind. The little boat emoji has gone. That's kind of a shame, but oh well. So now, if I go to the later levels, my boats are visible. That's perfect. Okay, so next thing is so I've got the P1 board here, so I'm gonna do the P2 moves. And so to get that, I'm gonna say equals index. Now, the important thing here is that each game has 2 rows. So to get P2's moves, I'm going to go index 2 times the game number, which is $C$2. If I had more time to spend on this, I'd give it a named range, but I don't. I'm sorry, I'm one column not far enough because I want the one where I've already cleaned it up a little bit. Good. And then, so I'm going to do sequence 100. I'm going to have 100 rows, 100 moves, and then I'm going to have mid of this. So it's going to be 3 times this minus 2 and 2. And so what's going on here? Well, I'm taking advantage of the fact that I've made all the things exactly the same length now, which means that each letter number separator, letter number separator, letter number separator. It's always 3 characters long. So the first 3 characters contain the first move in a separator and so on across. So if I take, for move number 1, if I start from position 3, count back 2, position 1, that gives me I8. So I take 2 characters from there, that's I8. And then for the next one, I go 3 further and so on down. So that gives me all the moves. Then what do I want to know about this? 2 things. One, I want to know, is it a hit? And the way I'm going to check that is, I'm going to say sum if this and this, using dynamic arrays because I think they're awesome. If you don't have them, there are other ways to get to this, but they're not nearly as nice. So if that and that equals this, then oops, and that. Otherwise, 0. And then I'm going to, oops, make that C2 sharp. Oh, didn't like that. Never mind. I'll just copy that down. I'm going to take this formatting here. That tells me if it's a hit. Then I'll also ask if it's a skip. I'm going to leave that blank for now because I don't have to fill that in until I get to section 4, but I will tell you if you plan for just the existence of that column at this point rather than waiting until later, it makes it a lot easier in your designs. Then I want to know what turn number am I on. So obviously I always start on turn 1, and that's going to be a different from the rest, so I'll just make it red. And then the answer is going to be if, so it's going to be that plus if either the previous turn was a hit or previous turn was a skip, then 0, otherwise 1. So you can see turn 1 I missed, turn 2 I missed, turn 5 I hit, so I get a second one, so that's also part of turn 5, and then so on down. And then I want to know last hit, and that I can just do max ifs. So if max of this, where this is a hit. And actually, sorry, I'm going to take all the absolutes off that because then I can copy it across and use it again for player 2. So turn 79, and let's go back to one that we know, game 1. Player 2 got it on the 10th turn, and that's the same as what we had before. So that's good. So now let's go over here and copy all of this. Put it over here. And now we're going to do player 1 moves. And we're going to say instead of 2 times the game number, we're going to say 2 times the game number minus 1 because player 1 is in the row above. So let's just double check that we're getting the right one. Player 1, game 1, A7, J1, B0, A7, J1, B0, perfect. And, oh, good, that formula already works nicely. This one doesn't work because I need to point it to this board and then copy that down. Skip logic is still there to be worked on. And so yeah, 10 and 33, that's the last hit, just like we remember. And then the last piece that I need is sequence 100 for the 100 games, and I'm going to make a data table. So it's going to be the min of this, and dt, column input cell, it's going to be the game number. Give that just a second to calculate. Oh yeah, it's calculating two data tables because I got my old one open, so I'm going to shut that down. And then we've got 10, 40, 78, 35, 1. That looks kind of familiar, so yes, I think that's right. So I'm going to pause there for a second, and then I'll come back in a little bit and show you how I automated the hits.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. All right, so let's get on to the bit that I think people are most interested in, which is how do we model the skips when we've sunk a whole ship? How do we figure out what we need to pass over? So let's just skip on to game 76. So let's say when I've sunk all of this ship, I need to make sure that I don't use a turn for any move that goes around it. So let's show you how I did that. I'm just going to put in a new sheet. I'm going to make it all narrow like that. Okay, so I'm going to need a few different grids for this. The first one obviously is this one, which says where are the ships? And then the question I'm going to want to figure out is when is each ship sunk, which means what is the last time the ship gets hit. So first I'm going to make another grid to figure out when does each square get hit. And that's just going to be match the letter, locking the column, and number, locking the row against player on board, player 2 shooting at it, so I've got it here. So match it against that, comma 0. So let's see, the first one to get shot is I8, and then the last one to get shot is A1. Okay, so I've got that. So in order to figure out which is the largest of these four, which is the largest of these three, and so on, I'm going to need to identify which ship is where. And the way I'm going to do that, and this is kind of the crux of my solution, is I'm going to identify each ship by its top left cell. So in other words, this is going to be the B2 ship, this is going to be the D2 ship, this is going to be the C7 ship. And the way I'm going to do that is just like this. And I'll just copy down that grids of letters and numbers so we can reference it, and then I'm going to say this. I'm going to say equals if this. So in other words, if the corresponding element is a ship, then if you know what? Sorry, just realized because I want to look to the left and above, so I'm going to have to get a version of this that doesn't have these number labels, because otherwise I'll get confused. If there's a ship here, I'll think it's part of a ship here. That's not helpful. So first things first, let's just insert some rows here and put in the grid without anything around it. There we go. Okay, so now I'll work off that version instead. So now I'm going to say if this. Now you can just say if that, because 1 is treated as true and 0 is treated as false, but just to make it extra clear, I'll say if that equals 1, then if this one equals 1. In other words, if I am the second, if I'm part of a ship that carries on to the left, then I'm going to take the name that appears on the left. Otherwise, if I'm not part of a ship that continues to the left, if I'm part of a ship that continues above me, then I'm going to take the name that's above me. And then finally, if I'm part of a ship but it doesn't continue to the left and doesn't continue above, that means I'm the top left cell, so then I want to take the name. And the name is going to be, like I said, I'm going to name it after the coordinates. So the name is going to be A, lock that in, and 1, lock that in, and then I'm going to close that, and otherwise blank. And just fill this in, copy down, copy across. And so now you see I've got a 4-cell ship that starts in B2, I've got a 3-cell ship that starts in C7, and so on. So then, I'm going to need one more grid, and this one's going to say if this is a ship, so if that equals 1, then I want to know when's the last time that that ship gets hit. That's going to be max ifs. So if this grid that tells me the names of ships is equal to that top left cell, my current one, I'm sorry, doing an if, but max if's format is different, so sorry. So it's going to be the max of the hit number, the turn number that gets hit, where this grid matches the current ship that I'm on. And otherwise, I'll just leave it blank for now, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And so now you see, I've got, let's say this is my B2 ship, and the last time it gets hit is 98. And so now all of the cells in the B2 ship say 98. All of the cells in the D2 ship say 90, and so on. So now I've got the last time it gets hit in every cell of that. So now the next thing I'm going to want to do is, so that's if it's a ship. Now what I want to do is for everything around a ship, I want to get the first time that it gets eliminated. So in other words, you know, if you're here, it'll get eliminated after turn 98. If you're here, it'll get eliminated after turn 60. If you're adjacent to a couple of ships, then whichever ship gets sunk first is going to go. So first, I've said if I'm a ship, so if that cell here is a 1, then I do this thing. Otherwise, I'm going to say if sum. So I'm going to sum the cells in every direction around it. If that sum is greater than 0, that means, so I'm already in the not a ship branch. So if it's a ship, do this thing. If it's not a ship, then sum the ones around it. If that's greater than 0, that means I'm next to a ship. That means I'm one that could be eliminated, and I want to know what turn I'm going to be eliminated on. So if that's greater than 0, then it's going to be the minimum. Sorry, I'm actually going to do a min ifs. And so one of the things you have to be a little careful here is not to do a circular reference. So what I want to do is I want to take the minimum of the ones around it. But if I just say the min of this, then it's going to be a circular reference. And you can do that, but you have to be super careful with circular references. Sorry, I don't want to lock anything in there. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to say min ifs. So I'm going to take the smallest of the ones around it, where this is 1. So in other words, if I'm not a ship, but I'm next to a ship, then take the smallest of the values of when the ships around me sink. And then otherwise, my last otherwise, I'm just going to say 101. And the reason I say 101 is because the skip logic is going to say if I try to sink, let's say, cell D6 after turn 60, then I should skip that turn. So the ones that are not next to any ship never get eliminated, so I should only skip those if it's after turn 101. In other words, I never skip those. So that's that, and then just to make it a little easier to read, I'm going to put some quick conditional formatting here. Obviously, you don't need to do this on the day. So let's say equals this equals 1. Again, you don't have to say equals 1, but it just makes it a little easier to read. So I'm going to make my ships gray. Boom. So now you can see everything that's around the 98 ship gets knocked out after turn 98. Everything that's around the 5 ship gets knocked out after turn 5. Everything that's around the 60 ship after turn 60. And the ones that are next to 2 ships get knocked out at the lower of the 2 turns. And so that's basically automating that exact kind of grid that I had done in a super manual way before. And now that we have that, I just need to reproduce it for the other player, and then we will be ready to fill in that skip column and finish it off. So let's just copy this over here and make sure that I'm referring, actually, if I get the spacing right, I can do it exactly. So how many, no, this is the disadvantage of having my font made gigantic. I can't see the number of rows there, the number of columns there. So that's 11, 12, 13, 14. It goes from C to P. Okay, so that starts at C. It should be, I don't know, from B to P, so I'm going to go to Q. Whoops. Okay, so I might have screwed something up there. Oh, yeah, because I pasted cell too high. Okay, so that's going R6 to AA15, which, oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted from Q. All right, so we'll try one more time. Okay, Q6 to Z15. That is picking up that board, good. And then let's see the rest of it. That's locked in on column C, so I need to move it to column P. The rest of that is fine. And this one is all relative, so that's working fine. This one is not working fine. Okay, so this is an absolute, so I have to just pull it across. And this one up here is also an absolute, so I have to pull that across as well. And then I should be all set. Okay, so finally then, how do I know it's a skip? So a couple of things. Importantly, skips only apply at level 4, so I'm going to just put in a if level equals 4, then we can do all this stuff. And then if sum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out what turn this gets skipped on, the thing I'm hitting right now, what turn that gets skipped, that gets passed out on, and if I'm past that turn, then I'll skip it. So I'm going to say sum of if I8 equals this and this, then this. So that's just basically doing a lookup. So I8 is going to give me that 42 there, otherwise 0. And then take the sum of that. If that sum, come back over here, is less than B22, which is the move I'm on right now, then it's a skip, otherwise it's not a skip. And if we're not on turn 4, then it's not a skip. And I'll copy that format across, and then let's fill it down, and let's just see when's the first skip, and we can check if that makes sense. So when I shoot, alright, I'm still calculating. Let's finish calculating, please. Okay, so, yeah, here we go. So my first skip is shooting at I2 on turn 12. This player 2 shooting at I2 on turn 12. So I2. Okay, yeah, so I sync J1 on turn 10, and then I don't have to do I2 on turn 12. There's J1 sunk, I2 I can skip. And so you see now, this is turn 9, but then because I skipped, it stays on turn 9 and stays on turn 9 because I skipped both of those two. So all of these 3 moves are now the same turn. And then I just need to copy this across and make sure my references still match. Let's see, it's all relative, so I think that's working. If the level is 4, yes. That part's locked in, that's fine. This part I'll need to move across. So D to M, sheet 1, D to M, I'll need to change to Q to Z. There I'm saying Z like an American. And then I think the rest of that stays the same. And we'll just do one quick sense check here as well. So where's my first one? Here it is. My first skip here is when I shoot at C3 on turn 41. So C3 on turn 41, right, because I've shot and sunk D4 a few turns before. Can I see that here? Yep, so I've shot D4 2 turns before, so then I don't have to shoot at C3. And so that turn carries on, and then the next one I hit something, and so I get all 3 of those shots as one turn. And then the rest of the workings, this table here is still kind of giving me the answers for all the different values, so now I think I just link that back in, and hopefully I'm done. I'm going to do a VLOOKUP again, especially for you, Dan. And then, well, let's just see. If I have the same total, then I'll feel pretty good that I got the answers right. So my total is 5,631. The total of the answers is 5,631. Okay, so probably that means I got it right. And that's it. That's how you do it. So I hope you found that helpful. I gather from some of the comments I've seen online that a lot of people were scratching their heads as to a good way to approach this section 4. I mean, again, I've mentioned already, I think this isn't something that I came up with on time to do it on the day. You know, being able to come up with good design quickly is kind of the biggest differentiator in these competitions, I think. But you know, I was able to come up with something that worked that I showed you quickly earlier. So anyway, if you enjoyed that, I got a lot more positive response than I was expecting to people wanting to spend an hour watching me solve Excel problems. So I'm going to see if I can do a few more of these and see if people continue to be interested. I'll probably pick up some more of the Battle of 16 problems in the next few weeks, and then maybe some of the FMWC Open problems once those happen. And yeah, if you're interested, the FMWC Open is going to be streaming live in the first few weeks of December. You can follow the Financial Modeling World Cup channel to see that. And yeah, if you want to subscribe, then you'll know when I put out another video. Thanks for watching.